quiet here, but not the kind of quiet that asks for noise. This is the kind of quiet that doesn't flinch anymore when no one texts back. The kind that lingers in the soft click of your mug on the counter, the way your bare feet meet the floor in the morning, the small sacredness of locking your own front door, not out of fear, but completion. You don't wait for footsteps anymore. You don't look for signs in someone else's eyes. You've stopped translating your life into a language someone else might want to speak. And in that silence, the one that used to ache, something else has grown. Not loneliness, not bitterness, but a knowing that this space, this breath, this stillness belongs to you. That you no longer perform softness to be chosen. You are soft and sharp and whole. Not because someone loved you right, but because you finally stopped asking them to. No one taught you how to do this. How to walk yourself home without applause. How to bury a fantasy and plant freedom in its place. How to be both the fire and the hearth. But you did. And you are. And now something inside you refuses to settle for being half understood ever again. There is something untold in the way you set the table for one. Not in sadness, but in ceremony. The world never taught you to see yourself as sacred without a witness. But here you are, pouring the wine, lighting the candle, closing the blinds, and still you shine. Carl Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And yet for so long, what you were becoming was filtered through someone else's gaze, his desire, his need, his chaos, his silence. Not by force, but by habit. By the inherited myth that a woman's wholeness is proven by how well she is wanted. But you woke up. Not all at once. Not in a lightning bolt. But slowly, through the echo of your own voice in the room. Through the clarity that came not from answers, but from finally running out of performances to give. Solitude didn't come to you as a punishment. It arrived as initiation. The moment you stopped needing your life to make sense to anyone else, that's when it began to belong to you. This is the essence of individuation. The Jungian idea that we are not here to become good or pleasing or acceptable to others, but to become whole. To integrate the scattered parts of ourselves, the ones we hid, the ones we gave away, the ones we buried to survive. To meet the self, not as a fantasy of perfection, but as a wild, living truth. And this choice to live alone, not because no one wanted you, but because you finally wanted yourself, is a radical act of individuation. Jung said, "Solitude is for me a fount of healing, which makes my life worth living." But few understand what that really means for a woman, especially one who has been trained, generation after generation, to disappear inside someone else's story. You were taught to be a mirror, to reflect, to soothe, to adapt. But now, you are becoming the flame. There is something archetypal in this movement. In reclaiming your space, your time, your attention. You are not just breaking up with men, you are breaking up with the internalized belief that love must cost you your center. You are confronting your projections, no longer mistaking intensity for intimacy, no longer handing over your heart hoping he will know what to do with it better than you do. This is shadow work in real time, not the spiritual buzzword version, but the raw, everyday courage of sitting with your unmet needs without outsourcing them to someone who never earned the right to hold them. You no longer chase wholeness through union, because now you are the union of light and shadow, of fire and stillness, of ache and awe. And this unsettles people, because a woman who lives alone without apology cannot be managed. She cannot be predicted, possessed, or pitied. She is no longer living in reaction. She is no longer seeking roles, lover, wife, muse, fixer, to anchor her identity. She is not a chapter in someone else's story. She is the whole damn book. And when you realize that, truly feel it in your bones, the silence no longer scares you. It becomes your compass, your teacher, your liberation. There is a moment, subtle but irreversible, when a woman stops waiting to be seen. Not because she's given up, but because she's finally looking at herself with the eyes she once reserved for someone else. This is what Jung called reclaiming the projection. Every time you looked at a man and saw your savior, your future, your completion, you were meeting a part of you in disguise. The animus, Jung called it, the inner masculine, the unclaimed logos within a woman. He wrote, the animus is a bridge to the self, not a bridge to him, a bridge to you. And so every man you once bled for, broke for, bent for, was never the destination. It was the mirror. He showed you your hunger. Not for him, but for your own lost power, your own clarity, your own rootedness. You've stopped romanticizing the chase, because you've seen what it costs to beg for belonging in someone else's world. It costs your voice, your time, your nervous system. Now, your home is not just where you live, it's who you are. A woman who has chosen herself so completely, there is no room left to audition. And this quiet defiance, it shakes the framework of a world still addicted to female compliance. They don't know what to do with a woman who isn't performing her worth, who isn't sweetening her tone to be palatable, who doesn't ache out loud in hopes someone will rescue her. You're not loud, but you are unmistakable, because peace, real, earned, sovereign peace, has a frequency that cannot be faked. You don't posture, you don't over-explain, you don't beg to be believed. You just are. And for some that's unsettling, because if you don't need to be chosen to feel whole, then what happens to the entire mythology we've built around womanhood? You become a quiet revolution. You show other women what's possible when they stop shrinking, when they stop apologizing for the way they rise, when they stop tying their softness to someone else's ability to receive it. You didn't get here without grief. That needs to be said. You grieved the fairy tale. You grieved the versions of you who once made herself smaller, so love wouldn't leave. You grieved the mirrors that only reflected your beauty when you were useful. But you didn't stay in the grief. You used it. You let it hollow out the parts of you that were never truly yours. And in that emptiness, you planted truth, not the kind sold in self-help slogans, but the kind that lives in the marrow of a woman who has finally stopped flinching at her own reflection. You have become both mother and father to yourself. Your inner masculine no longer seeks domination, it protects, it provides structure, it honors the vision. Your inner feminine no longer seeks validation, she creates, she listens, she trusts. You are whole, not perfect, not untouchable, not invulnerable, but real. And in a world obsessed with performance, your authenticity is a kind of sacred rebellion. This isn't about rejecting men. It's about refusing to abandon yourself in the name of being loved by one. It's about no longer outsourcing your belonging. It's about knowing that your solitude is not a waiting room, it's a kingdom. You are not hard to love. You just no longer negotiate your light. And that, more than anything, is the truth about women who live alone without a man. There are things you do now, quiet things, defiant things, that carry the weight of revolutions. Not grand gestures, not declarations meant for an audience, but micro-movements of sovereignty. Each one a line drawn in the sand between who you used to be and who you refuse to become again. These aren't behaviors to try. They're not strategies. They are sacred responses to a woman who has finally reclaimed herself. 1. You leave the message unanswered. You used to respond quickly, afraid silence would be mistaken for disinterest. Now you pause, not to punish, but to protect your peace. He wonders why the old tactics don't work. You don't explain. You've stopped mistaking availability for value. 2. You wear what makes you feel like you, not what might make you more desirable. You once chose outfits based on imagined eyes. Would he think this is too much? Too plain? Too bold? One morning, you put on the dress that always made you feel electric and didn't ask the mirror for permission. You walked through the world less noticed, but more felt. Not for how you looked, but for how little you needed to be seen. 3. You don't soften your no. You padded every boundary with sorry, just to seem polite. Now, when something doesn't feel right, you simply say no, full stop. Some call you cold, but your body calls you safe, and that's the only voice you listen to now. 4. You stop narrating your life to people who haven't earned front row seats. You over-explained everything, hoping to be understood. You realized explanation is a form of performance, and withholding is a form of power. Your silence unsettles them more than any story ever did, and you're okay with that. 5. You walk away without making it a lesson. You used to stay in dying connections just long enough to prove your point, hoping they'd finally see what they did. Now you leave mid-sentence if it means keeping your dignity. You realize the exit doesn't need closure, it needs courage. And you have that now, in spades. 6. You reclaim your mornings. You woke up checking messages, already bracing for the world's needs. You started your day in silence, coffee, breath, sunlight on the floor. No phone, no noise, just you. You no longer begin the day reacting to the world. The world now waits its turn. 7. You no longer shrink around fragile egos. You dimmed your intelligence, your insight, your intuition because it made men feel small. One day, you said what you actually meant, without the usual apology or laugh to soften it. Some left, some got quiet, and the ones who stayed, they met you. Finally, these aren't just habits, they are holy acts of self-respect. Each one chips away at the mythology that told you to be pleasing before you are real. Each one is a return, not to who you should be, but to who you already were before the world asked you to forget. There's something electric about a woman who stops explaining her choices, not because she's defensive, but because she's done auditioning. Every time you choose not to justify your solitude, you're reminding the world, your life is not a puzzle that needs solving. It's a portrait, whole, sovereign, and already framed. 8. You don't translate your worth into productivity anymore. You used to measure your days by output, what you accomplished, how busy you stayed, who you pleased. Now, rest is no longer a reward. It's a right. You feel guilty sometimes, but only for a moment. Then the stillness sets in, and it feels like truth. 9. You embrace mystery over performance. You thought clarity meant explaining every corner of yourself to be lovable. You started leaving space to be misunderstood, space to evolve without narrating the process. People lean in now. They ask questions. They notice. And you've learned that mystery isn't avoidance, it's power. 10. You don't rescue anyone from the discomfort of who you've become. You managed others' emotions like it was your job, constantly softening your edge, backpedaling your truth. You began to let people feel the full weight of your boundaries. Some fumbled, some fled, but the ones who stayed began meeting you as an equal, not a project. You let joy in without needing to share it. Every high had to be witnessed, posted, validated. You caught yourself laughing alone and didn't reach for your phone. You realize joy is real when it doesn't need proof. Now your happiness doesn't perform, it simply lives. 12. You protect your solitude like it's sacred. You treated your alone time as a gap to fill, with calls, plans, background noise. You started canceling plans that didn't feel right, even if it meant staying in. The world felt quieter, then richer, then yours. 13. You no longer contort yourself to be understood. You feared being too intense, too deep, too complicated. You realize that the right people don't fear depth, they crave it. Now you speak in your real voice, and when someone doesn't get it, you don't shrink. You let them go. 14. You understand that not all silence is emptiness. Silence used to scare you. It meant disconnection, rejection, being forgotten. You stayed in the silence long enough to hear your own voice again. Now the quiet is not empty. It's full of you. These are not loud choices. They don't trend. They don't beg for applause. But they change everything. Because they aren't about isolation. They're about integration. Of the woman you were, the woman you pretended to be, and the woman you finally are. You've realized something most never will. The deepest form of love is not being chosen. It's choosing yourself, especially when no one's clapping. And that choice, repeated in small, steady ways, becomes a life. A life no one gave you. A life no one can take. A life not built on being claimed, but on being known by the one person who never left. You. So now I ask you, not to answer, but to feel. What part of you still waits for someone to name your worth out loud, even though you already know it in your bones? Where does the old ache still linger? The one that whispers, maybe if I were easier, quieter, less. And will you meet that ache with compassion, not correction? When did you last choose something only because it felt right to your soul, not because it made sense, not because it was understood, not because it would be approved? How many pieces of yourself have you reclaimed in silence? And do you still mourn the fact that no one noticed? Are you brave enough to keep going without applause? Are you willing to be misunderstood in the name of being real? Can you stand in a room where no one mirrors your truth and still know it's truth? And deeper still, if no one ever came again, if no one ever saw you the way you used to crave, could you still love the life you're building with both hands? You say you are alone. But what if this isn't absence? What if this is arrival? This isn't loneliness. This is the sound of your life finally belonging to you. The silence you once feared has become your sanctuary. The space you once filled with others' needs has become the temple of your truth. And the woman you used to dilute to be digestible is now whole, untamed, and home. You are not waiting. You are not hiding. You are not unfinished. You are living, deeply, deliberately, without the need to prove a single thing. So no, you don't need to calm it to be seen. But if something stirred in you, if a truth cracked open, if a memory softened, if you exhaled like you finally heard someone speak your language, then let this space be a declaration, not a performance, a presence. Share this with a woman who's been told her solitude is lack. Show her it is legacy. And as for you, let your life continue to whisper the most radical truth of all. You don't need to be claimed to be complete. You were always whole. You just needed the silence to remember.